Formula One returns to our lives and our TV screens with the Mexican Grand Prix set to take place this week. And yes, the good news is that you have back-to-back race weeks because just last weekend we had the United States Grand Prix. The bad news, if you're a fan in the Indian subcontinent, is that, well, the races start a little late at night, and so it can be a little problematic actually catching up with the race and when exactly it's happening and following the live action. But nevertheless, there is going to be a lot of excitement for the race, even though, as we know at this point, there's literally nothing to play for all teams. The World Drivers' Championship has been decided, the World Constructors' Championship has been decided, and as a result, these races do have a little bit of a freebie vibe to them, in the sense that you do get the feeling that some team, some driver, maybe someone just decides to take the race by the scruff of its neck and actually impose a result on it if they can. Now, whether or not that can happen, that remains to be seen, but we're going to be previewing the Mexican Grand Prix, a race that, if you remember, returned in the 2021 season after a one-year-long break due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're going to ask 5 major questions that would be on our minds and possibly on your minds as well ahead of this race. Now, the first question, of course, relates to this man and whether or not he's actually going to continue his dominant run at Mexico. Now, again, you remember that even during the time when Red Bull weren't regular race winners during the turbo hybrid era, which saw a lot of Mercedes dominance, Mexico was always one venue that favored the Red Bulls because their cars tended to function better at a higher altitude than the Mercedes or even the Ferraris to some extent. Now, obviously, due to that, there is going to be, there is very much a possibility that we could be in for yet another crushing Max Verstappen or even Sergio Perez victory. Who knows? It would be nice to see Perez actually get, a big win in front of a home crowd. But we have to not kid ourselves. The favorite would be this man, as he has been for pretty much the most of the second half of this season. Can anyone stop him? Well, I'm pretty sure there'd be people who'd be wanting to try, but whether or not they can do it is going to be a whole story altogether. And for me, at least, Verstappen does start this race as the favorites, not only due to his current form, but also due to the past successes that the Red Bull has enjoyed at this particular venue. Now, number 2, and the big question is, will there be any redemption for this man, Carlos Sainz, who, of course, you'd remember, took a well-deserved pole position at the US Grand Prix, but unfortunately ended up crashing out of the race during the first lap itself of the United States Grand Prix. In fact, it wasn't even his fault. George Russell cut across, took a bit of a bump, Sainz spun, that's it, end of race, that's it. And the problem was, of course, that, it was a very good drive from Sainz to actually get pole, but he couldn't actually exploit that in any way. And he will be keen to actually, not only get some redemption for what happened in the last race, but also get Ferrari another win. They haven't won a race in quite a while. And they're whatever, title challenge that they had mounted has absolutely fallen off a cliff for the most part. Of course, we know that they no longer have a shot of winning the title, but it would be nice for fans of the Scuderia and, of course, Sainz's fans himself if he can actually get the team another win or at least some strong results before the season comes to its inevitable end. The other question, of course, is what exactly can we expect from Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes coming into this track? Now, the W13, the car that Mercedes have produced for 2022, has been absolutely unpredictable, and it can veer from world class in one circuit to outright awful in the next. There's no in between. There have been peaks, there have been troughs, and they've generally struggled to find that consistency, that all-important consistency that is needed to be a regular race-winning team, never mind even one that will be contending for the championship. And it is also worth noting that one of the reasons why Red Bull had so much success in this particular track, even during Mercedes' dominance time, was because this was always a track that Mercedes struggled in. Their cars just couldn't cope with the higher altitudes as well as the Red Bulls could. So what exactly can we expect from this circuit? If you're asking me, I would say there would be some degree of struggle for the Mercedes. I would be happy to be proven wrong, but this is going to be one of those tracks where downforce isn't going to be as important as it would be in tracks like, say, US, Brazil, or even Abu Dhabi. This is a track where there are plenty of straights, so your straight line speed is actually going to be important. It's very high speed, especially the straight that is encompassing the start finish line. Of course, there's 3 DRS zones in this particular track, so for me, I think Mercedes can expect struggles, and anything that they get here would just be a case of salvaging weekend that could potentially not be very, very good. Not something that Mercedes fans would want to hear, but that is the grim reality of a side that is still trying its best to get whatever performance it can out of a car that has been very, very reluctant to consistently show any kind of good performance. The other major question, of course, is what can we expect from this man, Fernando Alonso? Now, you'd remember he had arguably the most topsy-turvy weekend in the history of any Grand Prix driver, because if you'd remember, at the US Grand Prix, he had a very impressive 7th place finish, which was actually doubly impressive considering the fact that his car was basically all but upended, sent flying by his future teammate Lance Stroll. That'll be one fun thing for them to revisit when they're Aston Martin teammates. But beyond that, he did get that 7th place finish, but it was then taken away from him due to a protest from Haas. However, what Alpine did was actually appeal the legality of Haas's appeal. And if that sounds confusing to you, you won't be the only one, because it genuinely was that weird a tale. The good news, if you're an Alpine and Alonso fan, is that Alpine's appeal against Haas's appeal was successful. I'm not going to say the word appeal again. However, their appeal was successful. I had to say it one more time. And that means that Alonso actually gets a points finish, which, he had actually earned through outright merit at the US Grand Prix to begin with. So with that in mind, is he going to be really motivated to actually continue the good run he's had through the season? I would say so, because Alonso has always been the kind of driver you need to light a fire under his ego, and he's going to be putting in his best performances. And not forget that Alpine car has been generally faster, and they would hope that this time around that both drivers, both him and Esteban Ocon, can get a good points finish and actually pretty much solidify their status as the 4th best team on the grid. Get that best of the rest, and it would be very, very beneficial for this team, even if they won't be having his services to call upon next season. The last and big final question for me is, what can we expect from Aston Martin in this particular race? Now, for me, if you ask me, no team in 2022 has had a more impressive turnaround than the Sebastian Vettel-led Aston Martin. They had one of the slowest cars on the grid in the start of the season, but ever since the Canadian Grand Prix, the Spanish Grand Prix, in fact, when they started bringing in heavy upgrades to the car, the upgrades worked a treat, and they are very much in a good position to be fighting for 6th place in the Constructors' Championship. As things stand, they're only 1 point behind Alfa Romeo, and that's actually mind-boggling considering the fact that not only did Aston Martin have a bad start to the season, but the Alfa Romeos were absolutely flying when the season actually got underway. However, that being said, they have actually been showing some improvements as of late, the Astons, so it wouldn't be the biggest surprise in the world if you saw at least one of the Astons, I'm banking on Vettel ahead of Stroll here, to get in on the points finish and potentially actually take them a little higher in that Constructors' Championship. Remember, where you finish in the Constructors' Championship is important for the team, because that is where you get the major amount of F1 prize money from. And that is it from us in terms of the big talking points, the big burning questions that we would be wanting to ask ahead of the Mexican Grand Prix. What about you guys? Are you excited for the race? Not that excited considering the season's already come to an end, or you're going to be tuning in to watch the race regardless? What exactly is it that you're looking out for? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and tap that bell icon. Then go ahead and follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram too. Last but not least, download the Sports with the Cap. Thank you all for joining us. As always, I've been Shane Dias. Bye-bye for now.